Hi, this is Pat Johnson, your psychology instructor, and in this mini lecture we're going to talk about the topics of forgetting, interference, and repression as they all relate to memory. If you recall from an earlier lecture, when we went over the three-stage model, we said that encoding occurred here and here. So in other words, if we pay attention to information that comes into our senses, we transfer that information from sensory memory to short-term memory, also called working memory. If we don't pay attention, in other words, if we don't encode, we dump information right out of sensory memory. That's called encoding failure. So if we don't pay attention to information going from sensory memory to short-term memory, if we have encoding failure, that's getting dumped right here. We can also have encoding failure right here. In other words, if we have stored something in short-term memory, but we don't take the effort to put it into long-term memory, this is also encoding failure. So again, we have information getting dumped out of short-term memory, or also called working memory. So if we don't do this, this happens. We also have what is called storage decay. Storage decay is controversial because some people don't believe that storage decay exists. Some people say that if we can't pull something out of long-term memory, we're having retrieval failure. But I and many researchers believe that there is such a thing as storage decay, and that is where information leaks out of long-term memory. Let me give you an example. I've moved probably 20 times in my life. I moved around a lot as a kid. I moved around a lot because of the military. And at each different place, and this is back when there were only landlines before cell phones, every place had its own phone number. Well, I don't remember those phone numbers. Even if somebody cued me, even if I was in that house again, I would not remember that phone number. It has been dumped from long-term memory. If I was to ask you what you ate yesterday, you might be able to remember that. But if I was to ask you what you ate a month ago you might not be able to remember what you ate on that day. It's just been dumped from your long-term memory. So that would be storage decay. So we can have encoding failure, we can have storage decay. We can also have retrieval failure as a type of forgetting. Retrieval failure is when we can't get information out of long-term memory. In other words, it's there, but it's just really hard to pull out. And as a teacher, this is the most frustrating thing, almost painful to watch my students have retrieval failure while they're taking a test, because it's in there. Maybe they're having test anxiety or just a little bit stressed out, and they can't pull it out of long-term memory. And we call that retrieval failure. So when you can't do this, you're having retrieval failure. Retrieval failure can be caused by interference. Interference is where old or new learning disrupts or interferes with the new learning. So let's suppose you're taking me for not only Psych 150, but you're also taking me for Soc 210, because I often teach both classes each semester. I have students who, because it's me, because it's usually the same classroom, they have interference. They are not sure if it is which type of research methods that they should be remembering. So that would be interference. Often I have military students say that the way they shot a weapon when they were hunting as a kid interfered with learning how to shoot a weapon for the Marine Corps. And so that would also be interference. Repression is a type of forgetting that term was coined by Sigmund Freud, and we'll go over Freud's theory in the personality chapter, but Freud depicted the personality as an iceberg, and what is up here is what's in your conscious, not conscience, but conscious. In other words, what you're aware of. And then below the surface is the unconscious mind. And when something is too anxiety provoking, when something comes up into conscious awareness and it is really anxiety provoking, Freud said we push that information back down into our unconscious, and he called that repression. So that's what we've talked about in this lecture. We've talked about forgetting as encoding failure, retrieval failure, or storage decay. Let's go back. Storage decay. So encoding failure, retrieval failure, and storage decay. We've also talked about interference, where different similar memories in long-term memory interfere with each other. And then we've talked about the Freudian concept of repression.